right, good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us. My name is Catherine. I'm a research librarian here at the Mount Prospect Public Library. I want to welcome you to tonight's program. And I do want to do a shout out to the Garden Club of Mount Prospect for co-sponsoring tonight's program. We have several members of the Garden Club here tonight, so thank you so much for being here tonight and sponsoring our program. So with that, I want to welcome our presenter, Heather Prince. Heather is a professional horticulturalist specializing in trees, shrubs, and natives. She has over 25 years of gardening experience. She is a freelance horticultural writer, writing blog posts and many articles on gardening. And she's also taught many classes at the Chicago Botanic Garden, Morton Arboretum, garden clubs, garden centers, so lots of experience. So thank you so much, Heather, for being here tonight. And thank you all for coming. And I will now turn it over to Heather.
Okay. Catherine, can we lower lights a touch, maybe? Awesome. I'm sure there's a light switch someplace in this room. Okay, I'm gonna find out where the speaker is the hard way. How far? There we go.
Right here.
Right
there. Circle.
there it is. Okay. Hang on. Wait. Oh, okay. Here is it. No. It's like a theremin.
Let's do right over here.
See, she's gonna give me a spot.
Right here.
Okay. Now I can't move. Okay. Anyway, welcome to Shady Care. Okay, I give up. I'm trying not to. I'm sorry. There we go. Okay. So welcome to Shady Characters. We're going to talk about plans for shady sites, but we're going to start with what the heck do we mean by shade? So these would be what we consider industry standard, so that when you pick up that plant tag, no matter where you are, and it says part shade, this is what we're talking about. So full sun is 6 hours or more of direct blazing sun, half a day, good half a day. Part sun or part shade is at 4 to 6 hours, so like just off half a day or less. And then full shade is 4 hours of direct sun or less. So when we're reading tags and when we're reading descriptions and folks say part shade, full sun, this is kind of what we're talking about. So we all have the same. See, I'm afraid to like move my feet. So we all have the same vocabulary, right? And then when you're looking at your yard, and this is a good time of the year to kind of go prowl around. We've had enough rain that we should know where the wet spots are, but leaves aren't quite out yet. We're starting to get some leaves here and there, but you can definitely kind of see where your tree canopies are and of course the buildings, and get at least an idea. But also things to think about as we're making these plant choices is what is casting the shade. So if we've got trees casting the shade, what kind of tree are we dealing with? Something like a Norway maple, it's like planting in a closet, right? There's no sun coming through that thing. Or if you've got evergreen trees where it's really dark, but then on the flip side, something like a honey locust kind of barely counts as shade. It's very filmy, it has very light. So this means we can kind of, push the boundaries of our plant choices a little bit. The other thing that casts shade in a lot of cases are buildings, houses, garages, sheds, what have you. There's no light under there, right? But things to keep in mind are how deep your eaves are, if you have a balcony, if you've got a walkout basement with a deck, kind of all of these structural things. And then fences. Sometimes we forget that fences are also cast shade. And also kind of what type of fence, because like the big stock, the white plastic stockade fence your neighbor put in is going to cast some shade, but like a picket fence doesn't really count, right? So, and then as we're thinking about our plant choices, when we get sun, what time of day are we getting that sun? Here in the Midwest, our morning sun is our gentlest sun, right? It's the least intense, whereas midday to afternoon in July and August, it's hot. So, and sometimes like that white plastic fence also reflects light. So if you have light colored walls, or you've got a concrete path, or you've got some light colored wall, seat walls or something, that's can also can reflect light too. So it's sort of taking a good gander at what all is going on in the yard, kind of doing a little bit of a site analysis so that we can see where those microclimates might be, or where we can push the envelope on some sun or shade tolerance. So this is the big and scary, I've laser pointer, ooh, yay. The big and scary soil triangle, right? But as we're talking about making plant decisions, it's also really important to know what kind of soil you're dealing with. And so there's some basic soil tests. Probably one of the easiest thing, grab a lump when it's not moist, like now, give it a squeeze. The stickier it is, the more clay you've got. The more it falls apart, the more organic matter you have. So you can kind of gauge drainage and that kind of thing by just picking it up and give it a squeeze, see what it does. If you want a little bit more scientific, also a good project for small children and spouses, is a nice mason jar, because we all have a mason jar floating around in the basement someplace. And fill it with water, maybe give an inch of space at the top. Put a trowel full or two of soil in it. Screw the lid on tightly, then shake it vigorously. This is where, nieces, nephews, and grandchildren come in handy. So leave it on the kitchen counter overnight, let things settle out, and then you can really see it's going to settle out into layers. And so our sand particles are heaviest, our silt particles are next, and then clay particles are very, very fine, and they tend to hang out at the top with any like organic matter, like compost, kind of floating around the top, the very, very top. And so then you take your handy ruler, do some measuring, and come back to our scary soil triangle and kind of figure out your percentages. I'm blessed with silty clay loam, which I realize I'm spoiled. And I have an old house with old soil, pretty much undisturbed soil. So, and then in this, well, it looks like we probably might get some rain later tonight or tomorrow. But if you're looking at drainage, like what does water do in your soils? The standard is dig a 12-inch by 12-inch square hole, fill it with water, see what it does. This does give you an excuse to sit there and watch it drain and tell your spouse that you're doing science. The book is for notes, it's not so. The faster it drains, the more silt and sand content you're going to have in your soil. So when you're looking at plant suggestions that say well drained or wet tolerant, kind of gives you an idea of what you're dealing with. So the goal is, if we know what our soils and our site are doing, then we can plant appropriately instead of fighting those conditions, which is hard work on you and lots of money at the garden center when things might fail. So, but you can also send soil in for soil testing for a deep scientific analysis, and try A&L Great Lakes in Indiana. And as it's their website is awesome. The University of Illinois doesn't do that anymore. So, but they have tons of information on their website on soils and soil analysis. So we can get very soil geeky, but pushing on. Because it's also allergy season, so. Let's see. So, as well as soil moisture, when you're reading the tag that says part shade, right? So when it says moist to wet or wet tolerant, it's soils that are that have some moisture in them most of the time, or like the bottom of the rain garden, the end of the downspout, the ditch in the corner. Average soils, what we most of us have, a little bit of this, a little bit of that. And then dry soils, if you have a raised bed, or sometimes the bit around along the driveway, because when they put the driveway in, that gravel spills out like a foot or so into the soils. Or if you've got a bit of a slope, it's where water is going to move really quickly through it. So, and things to think about, again, where does your water go when it rains? Does it hang out? Or does it, does it puddle? Does it move fairly swiftly? Do you have an irrigation system? Do you know how to work it? How to turn it on and off? So just because our weather roller coaster is such that irrigation, you should know how to control your irrigation system, because our rains are gotten just a lot more intense in the past few years. So we may not need to have it on for 15 minutes every day. So, but the other thing that I will trademark this eventually is the strategic bird bath gambit. Oops. Guess what? I found out how fast that goes. Okay. So by putting a bird bath in some tricky spots, you can give a little extra moisture to that area, especially under trees. And so because you're filling the bird bath, the birds are splashing it all over the place. And it's just in kind of a little sneaky way to get water someplace. I've hauled my concrete bird bath out finally because the robins were sort of looking at me through the window going, would you lady come on? So I have a lovely patch of ginger that is getting watered by the robins. So and so basically it's just, again, getting to know your site so that you can find your plants and match conditions to plants. So because if plants are in their optimum place that they want to grow, they're going to have far more resiliency to this roller coaster of climate change that we're all on. And so they might be able to handle those kind of environmental stresses. And then on kind of the flip side, if you have some plants that are super aggressive, but you still love them, if you stress them out a little bit, they can behave better for you. So, and so if you've got something, we'll talk about a couple things on the list as we get to them. We'll put it, stick it under a Norway spruce where it's dry as a desert, and it'll just be fine. But it's kind of, again, knowing those conditions can just less work on you. So, and less having to haul the hose around the yard. So we'll dive into that plant list. A note on the plants, these are all things that are going to be readily available from independent garden centers, native plant sales, and mail order. Big box stores are kind of a game of roulette. You never know what they're going to have. Always worth, check now and again, see what you can rescue. And then I've given you the botanic names on that handout. So when you Google this all later, because I don't expect you to remember it by the time you get to the parking lot, you can find the right plant that we're talking about, because there's like about 50 things called snowball bush, so there, so we'll jump in with our part shade, wet, moist plants. So half a day of sun, right around half a day of sun, and on the wetter side of the spectrum. With Acorus or Acorus ogon. So this is a plant that needs to be wet to be truly happy. It's super cute. It's only 12 to 18 inches tall, gives you a grassy texture, and it's bright chartreuse. You'll find it right now because a lot of times folks will use it in spring pots and containers, but it's perennial for us. We're in zone, actually, I think we're technically zone 6. We might have a toe into zone 5 where we're standing. But it's quite lovely as a short grassy texture along a path or kind of woven in to a raised bed. It's like part shade to full shade. It'll get super crispy if it gets too much sun, and good solid moisture. Windflower are anemones, and we've got 2 species of anemones that we kind of run across very commonly. The white one here in the top corner, that's our native anemone, Anemone sylvestris. That one is one of our woodland wildflowers, and it blooms in the spring. So its foliage is up right now, and it has this crisp white flower right around in May. I think it's going to be May this year. And then our pink flower on this one is the Japanese anemones, and Japanese anemones bloom in starting around late August, September. And so in Japanese anemone, there's many different cultivars, and they are also either pink or white or shades thereof. And they range anywhere from 3 feet to about 18 inches because there's doubles, and then there's some that have fancy undersides and all that. But all of these do really beautifully in average to moist soils. The moister the soil, the faster it's going to spread. So if you want it a little stress, you can kind of stress it out a little bit, but just a beautiful part shade, full shade plant, very easygoing, and the bees adore it. So blooms for lots of weeks. I am very fond of goat's beard. Aruncus dioicus is our native goat's beard. And I'm very fond of this photo because it shows you just how big this sucker gets. It's, it's like a stilby on steroids, huge, big, blowsy, fluffy, fantastic thing. Happiest in moist to wet soils, but it'll tolerate average, and it'll bloom in kind of like Memorial Day into June, and just be this lovely, super fabulous, fluffy thing in the corner. But it is a 3 to 4 foot perennial. So if you've got a big spot you want to fill, it plays well with the hostas, and gives kind of that really a nice softness. In the sedges, so we've got about 300 to 400 species of sedges that are native to the Midwest. And so I pulled out some favorites that I like that are a little bit different. Carex muscigamensis, or palm sedge. And as you can kind of tell in that photo, instead of being like the cousin mound of grass, that foliage is sort of stacked. The little leaflets come off a stem. So it has a very textural element in the garden. Mine reseeded itself to the bottom of the rain garden, and now that rain garden also gets the sump pump. So it's having a little swim. It's delighted with life. So, and there's still a patch a little on higher ground, but the one in the bottom where it's nice and mucky is living its best sedge life. So with all of our sedges, they are a larval host for a lot of skipper butterflies, a long list of moths, and some small butterflies. So we do want to see some holes in the leaves. And then the seeds are going to be eaten by our songbirds. So our sedges are blooming right now. They bloom early in the spring, and then they start to put their full growth on. So this is just kind of a neat textural element. Cardinal flower is one of our native plants. It's one of our few true red flowering natives. And so, and this one has to be wet to be truly happy. It's going to be a little more flexible on the sunlight as long as it has wet feet. And it tends to, this is about as big a clump as I would expect you to see. It tends to be a little bit of a stem here, a stem there. And then blooming in July through September, and providing much happiness to the hummingbirds because it has that tubular bright red flower. And so anything with a long tongue thinks it's just the best. But I'm continually amused. Our bee species also really love it, but bees, I don't know, they're either smart or lazy, depending on how you want to look at it, because what bees like to do is come in from the side and slice the corolla and get the sweet nectar without having to do the work of being a pollinator. And it's a behavior called nectar robbing. I call it cheating. Because the poor plant, puts all the effort into making pollen. Look at it, put this structure together, and you sneak in, steal it. Obedient plant, which my mother-in-law fondly calls disobedient plant, because if it's got enough moisture, it's going to spread. If you put it in dry shade, it stays put. And it blooms a little later. Our native is pink. There's a white cultivar called Miss Manners. There's a few, like 2 or 3 different cultivars out there. But it has this beautiful tubular flower, and for a late summer flower, that again, you'll see lots of bee butts in those tubular flowers. They really love it. But because each of those flowers is kind of held separately, and that calyx almost has a wire on it, so you can move the flowers and they stay put, which is why it's called obedient plant. And I'm the person who went on the garden walk and messed with all of your obedient plant. Because if you can't play with the plants, really, come on. It's part of the fun part of being gardeners. We have to be able to play with things. Rodgersia, which I really love Rodgersia for the foliage, because these big, huge leaves are just dramatic. But it does give you a nice fluffy flower that's a little bit fragrant as well. But this is another one that really needs some moisture to be truly happy, but it can be a real showstopper, and with ferns and some other things that are a little more delicate in its texture. All right, there's always more plants, but I only have an hour, so we have to keep moving. So full shade, the full shade dark wet corner. Our beloved wild ginger, which I'm very fond of. It's a sentimental memory plant for me. My grandmother had a whole huge patch of it. But I like the velvetiness of the foliage. And it tends to do this. It tends to form a really dense colony. And here's our strategic bird bath right there, because that's a birch tree, and under birch trees is super dry because it's a birch. It's got a root system like a sponge. So, but we got lots of happy ginger. It's up right now. It just sort of leapt out of the ground this week. And then it's going to have little burgundy urn-shaped flowers if you lift up its skirts and go poking around. It's one of our wildflowers that has a seed structure called an elaeosome, where it has a fatty, sugary coating to it the plant has done that on purpose to be attractive to ants. And so ants will come and take the seeds back to the larva. The teenage kids will have a nice sugary snack and then leave the seed behind. And so most of the time, if you have ginger, you'll have random bits of it popping up around the yard because the ants have courteously planted it for you. And I sort of like, if you want to grow there, buddy, give it a shot. We'll see what happens. Otherwise, it's easy to pull. So a stilby, right? So there's myriad types, height between flower colors and heights, and some with lacier foliage, some with not so bigger leaves. But a stilby is a water hawk. I have some on the north side of the house that I always forget is there, because I just never go there. And if it doesn't get enough water, it'll go dormant on you. So mine is there till about July, and then it just like, I'm done. So if you have a nice little, swale or some nice moisture, it's going to give you a lot of flower power. So I think it's kind of one of those staples of a moist, shady garden. In the fern department, I do like brilliant autumn fern, because when the new fronds come up, they're orange, and then it also turns russet in the fall. So it has some more going on than just green. It's quite nice under purple leaf trees like Japanese maples. It has it's pretty zippy. So, but it's a well-behaved fern. It does like extra moisture, and it's very wet tolerant. And it's going to get to about your knees, and give you nice, lovely ferny texture. You can tuck it in with the Rodgersia. So, Japanese forest grass, Hakanakloa. There's several cultivars out there, from green to lime green, and then there's one that's got some red in it that's kind of fun. This big photo here is the Chicago Botanic Garden. And I see this in more than once where because it has this wonderful cascading habit to it, they've planted the hill under the crab apples with just kind of just lovely waves of Japanese forest grass in between the hostas. So it's just got a beautiful textural softness. It kind of looks like a little river going down the hill. It does do best with good moisture. And it's going to give you lots of textural interest. I haven't gone back to see if this has actually made it next to the sidewalk, which, so it's getting trampled on and it's kind of dry. But somebody decided to be ambitious. But yeah, just really lovely element. The Ligularia, which doesn't really have a good common name, no matter what you do with it. But this one is a drama queen. She's going to tell you when she's mad because she wilts. And a lot of times it's the hot afternoon sun that they don't like, and then they just get wilty. As soon as the sun starts to pass, it perks right back up again. So, but different range of purples in the foliage on Ligularia. The bottom one is the rocket, so that has a little tighter flower spike to it, whereas something like Desdemona and Othello are a little bit of a looser daisy flower. And we're getting super close to bluebell season. I love bluebell season. So this is the Morton Arboretum. It's parking 11 is the sweet spot. So it's about 3 acres of bluebells. You can kind of see it goes all the way back there. And we're like any day now. We're gonna be with this nice warm day today and nice warm day tomorrow. We're getting close. And I realize this is a spring ephemeral. So once we hit like 90 degrees, it is dormant and gone. So interplant it with other stuff. I think we all deserve lovely sky blue flowers in April, right? I think you do, yeah. So they're definitely a top pollinator plant with that beautiful tubular flower. Our first hummingbirds, which are gonna show up any minute now. And our early moths and butterflies. I saw a bumblebee today. I was very excited. So it's easily available. It's just worth tucking in for that April magic. And Toadlily. So Toadlily is going to give us flowers the other end of the year in September. And I'm very fond of Toadlily because its flowers are pretty weird, right? They're very structured and very different. So this is a plant that you'll forget where you put it in the spring. And then September comes around, you're like, what the heck is that weird thing in the corner? It does beautifully in wet soils. There's some with some variegation in the foliage, but it's one that I would plant that where you're gonna be able to see it. I wouldn't shove it in the back of the bed, kind of put it a little bit toward the front. And the bees seem to like it too, which is nice. All right, hard shade, average soils, right? Everybody's soil, the everyman soil. Blue Star or Amsonia. We have several choices in Amsonia and a few different species that are native for us as well. It's just really indestructible, honestly. I've seen it do great in parking lots. I've seen it do great in my yard under some pretty hefty shade. So it blooms in May. It has a nice little light blue flower in May. But I really grow Amsonia for the fall color because it turns shades of gold to butterscotch. And it has this loose, airy texture to it. I am fully guilty of running my hands through my Amsonia every day because it's related to milkweed, so it's got a little bit of plasticity in the foliage. And so I have some right at the edge of the ring. I just kind of like just drag finger through because I can. Again, fairly indestructible, just very easygoing. Threw a couple vines in here because why not, right? So one Dutchman's pipe is one of our native vines. And this was beloved by the Victorians because it's a full sun to part shade plant. They would do a string trellis. There we go. Come on the porch, because this is a twining vine. It's going to twine around anything. And they would just make themselves a living shade cloth on the front porch. And then the goofy little flowers are tucked under the leaves. So you can sit on the porch in the nice cool shade and have weird looking little meerschaum pipe flowers, and gossip about the neighbors, right? So the other thing that you also get with pipe vines is pipe vine swallowtail butterflies, which are a big black butterfly with a metallic blue hind wing. And don't you deserve more butterflies? Yeah. Yellow foxglove, Digitalis grandiflora. So this is a perennial foxglove, as opposed to our biennial foxgloves from England, the big, huge pink ones, right? This one's going to be smaller in scale, in this beautiful buttercream, but the individual plants live about 2 to 3 years. I do let mine go to seed so that they're allowed to wander about, so, but it's a wonderful bumblebee plant. They like to hang out in those flowers on a rainy day. It's again a very easygoing perennial. It's just pretty happy-go-lucky almost wherever you put it. I would let some of it go to seed though, just so that you have some going. Geranium, our species geraniums. There's a few hundred different cultivars. Just tough as nails plants. Again, barely indestructible. I have taken a little piece of root and thrown it in the garden and said, good luck. And it said, okay. So, there's ground cover varieties that only get a few inches tall. There's ones like this in the main picture, which is Roseanne. You can kind of see she's sort of a soft, tumbly, sort of rounded plant. That's probably about 18 inches tall by about 24 wide. They all bloom in spring. Roseanne just keeps blooming till October. And then because they'll have a fuzzy, fragrant foliage, the rabbits don't eat them. Isn't that nice? There's something rabbits don't eat. And so we've got 2 species of native geranium that are larval hosts to a handful of moths, but all around, just a tough, good, hardworking, easygoing plant. Penstemon digitalis is one of our native penstemons. It's probably the most available penstemon on the market. It's a full sun to part shade plant. It blooms in June, in the weird 2 weeks that we have. That goofy gap in June, but the May flowers are done. The late summer flowers haven't started yet, and then you have this kind of pause in the middle. So penstemon does a nice job of filling that pause. I'd say, it might get 2 feet taller if it has an extra water, but the hummingbirds adore it. The hummingbird will find you, and then it will be back every day at 5 o'clock to check on it. And it makes a nice cut flower. So and then there's a bunch of cultivars. A lot of them are purple, because there's some sport genetics that have the purples and reds in them. If you want to, you can let it go to seed. The seeds are sort of mahogany and kind of nice, or cut it back and it's going to form a little tidy, roundy, moundy clump of foliage. The leaves will turn red in the fall. So all around neat plant. Up right now and considering blooming, but it might be another week or two, are Jacob's ladder. And it's really hard to capture that sky blue in a photo. When they first start to emerge in the spring, the foliage is purple before it gets the chlorophyll activated. It's just a very sweet little 12 to 18 inch plant. I have mine kind of dotted along the front of the border. Again, you're going to find it in the forest preserves, kind of on the edge of the woods, just hanging out. And it has, it's just very easygoing. And then it has a specialist bee that only nectars on this plant. So why not make a bee's day with a little Jacob's ladder? And you might get some touches of red in the foliage in the fall. But just an all around nice little guy. Bowman's root or Porteranthus. It used to be Gelenia, it's now Porteranthus. And I'm loving this plant. It needs to be in some shade because I put it in a few places. If you put it in too much sun, it gets super crispy and mad at you. But half a day of sun seems to be the sweet spot. And it's going to bloom with these delicate little white flowers that just kind of look like confetti. I like to pair it when I can't with like some purple heuchera or corabells to bring out that red stem. And then in the fall, it turns this glorious red to red-orange fall color. So this is something that's going to give you a lacy texture that can offset that heavy hosta, something that's a little more delicate. But the stupid thing is tough as nails, and the rabbits don't seem to eat it. I have rabbits. So believe me, I know what they're eating. Okay, full shade under the Norway maple. No, full shade average soils. Our columbine, which is up right now, it's going to bloom probably more. I think this year it's going to be May by the time it flowers. But this is our native columbine. There's lots of different cultivars in columbine. There's some that are, different colors of flower, some with some double or triple or super fluffy flowers. This happens to be our run-of-the-mill native one with the red and the yellow. It is a wonderful pollinator plant because it blooms relatively early in the season for bees and butterflies and hummingbirds. And that has a lot, the nectar is up here. So anything with long tongues, really. And then it's a larval host of columbine dusky winged butterflies, which are kind of a black goth butterfly. So again, don't you need more butterflies? Yes, you do. When it sets seed, and this is not the longest lived plant. So for me, because I like to let it kind of wander about, because it's very soft, it kind of blends in and weaves through things really nicely. I will let it go to seed, and then I kind of crush the seed pods and just throw it. And wherever it goes, it goes. So, but it does usually probably get a leaf miner. You can cut the foliage back when it gets super tatty, and it's going to flush out new foliage for you. Pen sedge is so far the winner of I've been doing some sedge experiments at home, testing their durability and how much abuse, the neglect they will put up with. Pen sedge is the winner in bloody-minded toughness. It will pretty much go anywhere, from dry to wet and anywhere in between. It does need some shade, but it's that lovely, soft grassiness. And so for me, I'm using it as a ground cover and to fill in the gaps between the shady stuff. So I don't have to, treating it like a ground cover or living mulch. Like all of our sedges, larval host to some moths, and it's going to spread by rhizome. So you'll see it the first couple of years, it'll kind of just sit there and think about things. And then you'll see a little tuft pop up, another one over there, and another one over there. And so, yank it if it wanders off. But other one, it can fill in and give you almost a lawn alternative. Seersucker sedge, I'm very fond of because it's so different. It's got a broad blade to it. It has a little ripple in the blade, where it gets the seersucker common name from. It's blooming right now. It has some awkward phase. It's got about 6 weeks of looking dodgy in the spring. We're finally coming out of the dodgy bit because it blooms first and then it starts putting foliage out. So mine just started putting foliage out like today. So, but it stays semi-evergreen. And so I had nice bright green leaves all the way through January. So I used this again to kind of weave between hostas and ferns to give a different textural element. The rabbits were very kind and cleaned it up for me in February. So, and so I don't have to cut it back when they do it for me. It's nice, right? Okay, of the bleeding hearts, I think this one's still Dicentra, but they did get a name change. This one's a perennial that's not going to disappear on you. So luxuriant is always going to be in the garden even after it flowers, whereas our native bleeding hearts will be ephemerals and go dormant in the summer. So, but this one it's only about 12 inches by 12 inches. So again, it's an edge of the pathway plant, or somewhere where you can really see it and enjoy it. It's going to bloom for about 8 weeks with these, little clustered flowers. They're really very sweet in a bud vase as well. So one more vine. Oh, there's another one after this, but climbing hydrangea. So we've got two species of climbing hydrangea on the marketplace. Hydrangea anomala petiolaris and Schizophragma hydrangioides, whose name just got changed to hydrangea hydrangioides after I managed to master Schizophragma. Both of these are sturdy, large vines that grab with little rootlets. So it's going to grab anything and scramble up. So it needs a hefty trellis because it can get 50 feet high. Or brick walls, that plastic fence you don't want to look at, with the hydrangea. It's got a shaggy bark for winter interest. It will take probably 5 years to flower because it likes to settle in. And the Schizophragma has the one sepal to it, and then this is the hydrangea, the true hydrangea vine. But it loves it has to be in some shade because if you put it in the sun, it crisps like a Dorito. So, but it gives us a lovely shady vine, right? Spotted dead nettle, which the more moisture you give it, the more aggressive it will be. But I like it as a crisp silver foliage under trees. Also rather nice under Japanese maples. And fairly indestructible. There's white ones and they bloom in a variety of colors and there's different degrees of silver. But if you need a tough little ground cover that only gets maybe 3 to 4 inches tall, this can be a really good choice. And it brightens up that dark shade. One of our natives that is finally getting appropriate attention is Spagelia. My husband calls this lipstick flower because it looks like little tubes of lipstick. And I chose this photo because I love this pairing with the Japanese forest grass because it pulls the yellow out of the flower. And this is a very easygoing, nice little clumping plant, one of our few true red native flowers. Again, with that wonderful tubular flower, hummingbirds and butterflies adore it. And again, just very easygoing little charmer. So I would definitely, sprinkle it in someplace where you're going to see it. It tends to bloom in June. So, all right. Heart shade, half a day of shade and dry as bone. Bachelor's buttons. Now, someone will always tell me, oh my gosh, they're so invasive. Well, stick them in dry shade and they behave themselves. I'm a sentimental gardener. I think they're cool. I like that crisp, that blue, kind of an electric blue almost. And that just structural is so cool. And if you, after it flowers, give it a little haircut to cut the seed heads off, it's far better behaved. And it will also rebloom a bit for you as well. So this is the blue one. There's a lavender, there's a white and lavender one out there too. But just an old-fashioned charmer. Coral bells, of which there are thousands, right? And they run the gamut from sun to shade. So read the tags because it'll tell you how much sun or shade it'll tolerate. And all kinds of flower shapes and colors. But I find for us, because of our clay soils, that coral bells can really do, if you struggle with them, a little trowel full of compost when you plant them, because they have that basal structure to the plant. And so it can rot out really easily, which is why it likes good drainage. So sometimes if we're in some sticky clay, some of that compost helps loosen that up and the water's not just rotting out that ground. And then, I've had folks, when I worked in a garden center, I came around the corner one day and a lady had laid out 20 different coral bells and made herself a mosaic on the floor. And she's like, I'm making a mosaic. I said, by all means, let me get you a cart. They're just fun to play with, right? They've got a wonderful foliage. You can mix and match and mess around with it. Why not? Honeysuckle. So this honeysuckle goes down to part shade beautifully for us. This one happens to be major wheeler, but there's a bunch on the market. Another twining vine, very tough critter and it blooms all summer. And then you get hummingbirds that'll fight over it, which is fun for us, if not for the hummingbirds. But it's beloved by hummingbirds. They will come find you. And so there's orange ones, there's pink ones, there's yellow and different degrees of fragrance. If you're at the Morton Arboretum, they've got a bunch planted in the Grand Garden, so you can do a little pre-shopping, right? So just, again, give it something to twine around. And if you have to, occasionally it might get some powdery mildew because we get the wet springs. Whack it back. It'll come right back for you. So yeah, it does really nicely. Catmint for sheer indestructibility. There's again a bunch of different cultivars out there, but I am fond of the purple, and I have mine in part shade in fast, sharp drainage. By testament to its durabilities, we had to replace the front porch in the middle of COVID. And so, of course, in November, the crew doesn't care what's in your flower bed, stomped the bejesus out of it. I'm like, that's got to be dead for sure. Next spring, whoop, back I am. I'm like, okay, plant, I guess you're living there. So, so points to Walker's Low. But it also is, I use it in cut flower bouquets because it's a nice filler. The bunnies don't eat it, which is glorious. So on the grass spectrum, little blue stem, our native little blue stem, although I would strongly suggest the cultivars because they stay upright. Our species little blue stem, its seed dispersal strategy as it goes to seed and then it flops over and drops the seed next door. So it gets very flopsy in the fall. Whereas the cultivars have kind of corrected that genetics so it's more upright. But the fall color is just every color of the rainbow. This is a plant that grows anywhere from my backyard to the dunes. So it's incredibly durable. It is one of our prairie plants, so it has good deep taproot. And it's also one of our hosts to a bunch of skipper butterflies. The straight species will flop, yes. The cultivars are bred to be more upright. You should have on if you're buying it at a garden center, you're usually getting a cultivar. It'll have a name to it. It'll have in quotes. So standing ovation, carousel, twilight zone are all kind of, those are going to stay right upright. Yep. And they'll be a bit more bluer in the foliage as well. So, but you're looking for a named variety. The names of the varieties. Oh, upright. Those are, so standing ovation. That's pretty easy to remember, right? Carousel, which is a little more basket forming, but it's upright. Twilight Zone is relatively new. And then there's a whole bunch others too that have come on the market. And because I think it's a far more interesting grass than Carl Forster. because it's blue and then it goes shades of purple in the fall. But it's very, very available. It doesn't look like it's not up yet. It's a warm season grass. So it'll turn up in late May when we're consistently in the 70s. And then it stays up all winter as well. We do have a native sedum. There's a million different sedums out there, but our native sedum is really happy in part shade. It also tends to bloom in the spring, so which is a little different from most sedum species. So if you like a nice little crisp green ground cover and under the trees, this can be a really nice option. Of the Tradescantias, I chose Sweet Kate because she's chartreuse, right? So she kind of glows in the dark. So even if it's not blooming, it looks like something cool, right? Like this bright green, grassy thing. But it is a Tradescantia, so it is fairly indestructible. Each flower opens for a day, so but there's just a lot of them. And then after that first flowering, you can give it a little cut back and it'll rebloom, kind of do a sporadic rebloom. And it's named for John and his son John, the Tradescants, who were some of the early botanists to Charles I in England. So, all right, full shade, dry shade, the hardest place to plant anything, also known as my yard. So this is the one that's super aggressive unless you stress it out. Mine is under a mature Norway spruce. It has taken 10 years. I now have 16 stems of it. It is mad at me and I don't care. I love the seed head on these. I think they're magical. But if you're planted, you can tell it's taking this whole strip because it had moisture. And if it gets a little moisture, it's going to run. It is one of our native woodland grasses. I found it in a parking lot in Naperville. I was so excited. And I went out to breakfast and someone, instead of planting the ubiquitous Carl Forester, had put in northern sea oats instead. And they're in a parking strip about 2-3 feet wide, and they're just growing because it's northern sea oats. You can't kill it with a brick. That's the best spot ever. Because it's also host to some butterflies and moths. So, they're a little extra fun in there. But I really love the seed heads on it. So, Cordalis lutea. This is the yellow Cordalis. Every once in a while, you'll find a white one. But this is our yellow guy, and it looks very delicate. It's surprisingly tough. And it will reseed politely for you when it's happy. But if it wanders away where you don't want it, just give it a little tug, pulls right out. But it blooms from June into October. So it gives you these nice, just wave upon wave of sulfur yellow flowers. So it's one of these easy plants to blend in the hosta garden and give you some zip. Bishop's hat barren epimediums. They're blooming right about now, or they're starting to bloom right now with these delicate little orchid-like flowers, which is why I tend to have them in the front of the border so I can see them. And then they'll have this sort of elongated heart-shaped leaf on it. And the yellow one, which is sulphurium, that one tends to be more of a spreading ground cover. The bottom one is lilac-y, and the top one is, I believe it's orange queen, more clumping shaped, but there's a few hundred different kinds of epimedium on the market. They're doing more breeding work in them. I have one called pink champagne, because why not? And one called scaly claws or scary claws, nuts. Anyway, also the foliage tends to linger over the winter too, so you have something in the garden. Just very easy, tough as nails plants. Hellebores, thousands of hellebores on the market. And they are incredibly durable. They're poisonous, so nothing eats them. At least in the deer and the rabbits generally avoid them. Their foliage is semi-evergreen, so you'll have something leafy and green now is through December into January. They tend to bloom in March. The flowers are very long lasting and they're still attractive when they're dried. So you'll have them for like 3 months of flowers. But they're just super durable. They like to be in dry shade. They handle it really well. It's a very slow growing plant though, so they are expensive unless you hit the one shipment a year at Trader Joe's. Somebody somebody found the Trader Joe's shipment. Yeah. My husband works for the Trader Joe's in Downers Grove. He's like, hellebores are here. I'm like, not for long. So snapped up the last 3, so but there's there's new ones every year. There's just a lot of fun. So just plant it, let it settle, it'll be with you for a very long time. When you have the most impossible place where the dog runs or the car run, the spot where you can't get out of the driveway, you hit it every time you back out of the driveway. Liriope is a reason why this has got a wall and a hosta barrier, because Liriope is an aggressive ground cover, but sometimes you need an aggressive ground cover. So this is one that looks like grass. It actually dries over the winter, is quite attractive. When it blooms in about August, September. So right about now in the spring, you give it a little weed whip, and just to kind of back a little. But if you are needing an indestructible, full dry shade, that's going to last. And believe me, I'm testing it. Because it's under my Katsura tree, and the Katsura tree is a water hog. So it's an ongoing conversation about who's going to win. So the Solomon teals, the polygonatums, is our true Solomon teal. Maianthemum is our starry Solomon teal. All of them are indestructible. And I love them because they're an arcing texture. They have this beautiful arching foliage, the little white bell-like flowers, and the bunnies don't eat them. It's an early nectar plant for our first hummingbirds. This little guy at the bottom is Polygonatum humile. There's a cultivar called Fred Case. It's only 3 inches tall. It is so cute. And then when they go dormant start to go dormant in the fall, they turn sort of a blonde caramel color. So they give you some interesting fall color as well. Our pulmonaria is blooming right now. And it blooms first, and then when the flowers fade, the leaves get bigger. Kind of the Brunera does the same thing. Lots of different colors of pinks and blues, some purples and some magentas. But that silvery leaf is really lovely late in the season and just super durable plant. I have one called Twinkle Toes because my father called me Twinkle Toes when I was a child. So I am a sentimental gardener. Twinkle Toes is a little bitty guy at about 12 inches. So some of these can get about 24 inches wide. Just a neat plant. And so that kind of wraps up our plant list. It's right at 8 o'clock. I managed to get right to 8, and we can take questions. Yes. A plant that ants like is the native ginger, our wild ginger. Yes. What I planted to, it doesn't, I would not say that ginger attracts ants. I'm not going to say that it'll keep it out of your house though. If you plant it on the end of the yard, as far away from the house as possible, it's worth a shot. But I hear you on the spring ants have shown up. Yeah. I'm not going to say that ginger is a ant preventative or attractor. It's kind of like if it's there, they'll find it kind of deal. Yeah. Any other questions? Yeah. The native anemone is Anemone sylvestris. Anemone for spring. It's also known as wind anemone sometimes. Fall blooming anemone.
They're so pretty. My problem is on the back of a border, they're kind of leaning in.
Okay.
You cut those back in the spring to slow it down.
The question is, with the Japanese anemone, the fall blooming anemone, can you cut it back to keep it from flopping? It's flopping because it's looking for water. They tend to flop because if they're too dry. You can try cutting it back. I might do a layering, cut the front half by half and leave the back end up, because that'll also stagger your bloom time. And just try it as an experiment. It's not the first thing that comes to mind for being successful at layering, but it's worth a try. Does that make sense? Okay.
What do you? Gooseneck Lismachia.
What do I think about gooseneck Lismachia? I would not. I would not. It is so aggressive that it can be very problematic in the garden. Someone will always it'll be successful. And if you're the type of gardener that can stay on top of it, but it's harder and harder to find in garden centers, because in the horticultural world, it's too aggressive for, unless you really know what you're doing with it. Yeah.
Spot where dry, dense,
And dry, dense shade, it probably behaves itself.
right? Yeah. Neighbors.
Yep. Right.
Round.
Sure. It's frowned upon because as soon as it escapes from that super dry, dense shade, it can run and fill an entire bed very quickly. So again, it's one of those plants you need to, if you know what you're doing with it. But it's not a plant that I would recommend for a beginning gardener. Because it's when you have to stress that out to get it to behave. And then if it sets seed and gets into the waterway, it gets really problematic. So, yeah.
Obedient plant, how does it spread? If you put it in a container, will it keep it contained, or does it spread by seed? Doesn't matter.
So the question is, how does obedient plant spread? Mostly by roots. So it's very rhizomatic. Yeah, you can keep it in a container, plant it in a bucket.
And I go, no, it goes nuts. Is catmint, is it different? Does it not spread like?
So the question is, does catmint spread like a traditional culinary mint? No, catmints are clumpers. So nepitas are clumpers. Right. And there's a whole range of sizes in catmint, from Walker's Low, which is not that low, to like cat's pajamas and everybody had a good time with the cat names, that are cute little, 12-inch by 12-inch clumpers. Nepeta in general is a clumper. Calamintha, you have to get the right cultivar of that, otherwise it can be a little spready. So, yeah. Yes. Mm-hmm. So keeping, it'll still be flowering. Bridal veil, is it bridal veil? Might be I think it might be bridal veil. How much water does it get? Yeah, you're nice to it, you spoil it. I might try a little bit of bloom booster on. A little bloom booster fertilizer that's high in nitrogen and phosphorus, or not high in phosphorus and potassium, low in nitrogen, because those are phosphorus and potassium encourage flower and fruit. Nitrogen is for foliage. So we don't want to over nitrogenate it. Is it near a lawn? It may be getting too much nitrogen from the lawn. Is the lawn getting fertilized? Okay, the one that's not getting fertilized. Yeah, I might try just a touch of blue, just give it a little fertilizer. Yeah. Of course, it's the favorite one that doesn't perform, right? Yeah. Yeah, it's fluffy. There's a peachy one too that's really pretty. But yeah, my yard's too dry. It's always a struggle. So, yes. Well, with so you're just because we're recording. So the question is how to deal with hard clay, post-construction clay, or just it's just clay. Yeah. And the hard thing is it's going to take about 100 years to change your soil. So not really. I'm not kidding. Top dressing with compost every year really helps because the microorganisms are going to bring that compost down in and really work it into your soil for you. I would also look at plants. So how much sun are we talking in that spot? No sun? Magnolia tree in front of it, so it's a denser shade. Boy, that's tricky. I would look at ostrich fern for sheer indestructibility. Because ostrich fern will punch through a lot. If you kill an ostrich fern, you get a prize. I've only met a half a dozen people who've actually killed one. So if you need one, let me know. I've got some, someone's going to have some to share. And I would try also the Solomon seal, because Solomon seal has kind of like iris, has almost a corm root system. So it's very shallow and it's indestructible. So the Solomon seals, the polygonatums. Okay. Yeah, I would do like at least an inch of compost every year. And I don't want to till it in. I just want to let those microorganisms work it in for you. Because every soil layer has its own microflora and fauna to it. And we're finding as we do more research on tilling, and you'll see this as you drive through Illinois, that a lot of farmers are not tilling anymore. To keep those beneficial organisms where we want them. Oh gosh. Yeah. I lean towards native selections because native plants, I'm not saying that every native plant is going to be drought tolerant and indestructible, because there are some very picky ones, believe me. But those may be better adapted to because they're adapted to here. So I would give also both the Chicago Botanic Garden and the Morton Arboretum have plant information services that are free. Chicago Botanic Garden is Plant Info Desk. Arboretum is Plant Clinic that you can email or call, and they have tons of resources on the website. So because we're running out of time. So that can give you some more suggestions. Those are off the top of my head. Okay. Chicago Botanic Garden and Morton Arboretum. Yes. Acorus and so Japanese sweet flag, the Acorus, and Japanese forest grass, Hakanakloa, have similar coloring, but different habit in the way they grow. So Acorus tends to be spiky, tends to be upright and kind of bushy. And then Japanese forest grass arches over and cascades. Yeah. I know. So rabbits that are eating Japanese forest grass, yeah. Repellents do work. You just have to be on top of it. The other thing with repellents is change it up every year. I bounce between 3 different formulations because bunnies figure it out. They're smart little buggers. But yes, they eat mine too. I understand. I do. So I think we got time for one more question. Go ahead. Yep. Mhm. Okay, so we have a situation with, is it a big silver maple? Is it a big silver maple? Craggy bark? Oh, sugar maple. Okay. So big sugar maple and a spot that floods regular, puddles and it floods. Okay. Yeah, you're looking for plants that will go wet to dry. And so very shady wet to dry. I would definitely look at the sedges because they can be very flexible. And there's tall ones, there's little short ones, but there's tall ones as well. And if you're looking at a rain garden list, you're looking for the second tier of the rain garden, things that'll tolerate some inundation and then dry out again. If it wasn't super shady, I would look at bee balms like Monarda is really, yeah. Hellebores are surprisingly tough. Yeah. Like daylilies are fairly, again, it's just so much, it's the shadiness that's tricky. I would also probably look at ostrich fern because again, you can't kill the dang thing. It spreads. When it's happy, yes, it spreads, which can be a pro or a con, depending on who you are. But I might also take a look at Christmas fern, which doesn't spread. It's a shorter kind of mounding fern that has a glossy dark green frond. It's called Christmas fern because it's evergreen through December. Yeah, again, you can't kill a Solomon seal no matter what you do to it. It's tricky. It's tricky. So your plant palette just gets a lot shorter. So you're down to like 6 or 8 things instead of 60 to 80, unfortunately. Yeah, I'm trying to think off the top of my head of well, sure, no one wants just hosta. I might try the Tricertus, as well, because that one's really flexible on the full shade wet spectrum, but it'll go to average soils really nicely. That Carex muskegamensis, the palm sedge, will also probably do just fine. And if it's happy, it's going to get about 24 inches tall. So that's okay. That's okay. That's a couple more things to try. Yeah. Lily of the Valley, either love it or hate it. Yeah. So Lily of the Valley grows anywhere, but it will spread. Driveway, your patio, your lawn. It's really not that picky. I have some because it's my birth flower and I'm terribly sentimental. So, come talk to you later. Somebody's got pink ones. I have one pink one and I have to remember where it is every time. Thank you so much for coming out.